Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter with Brian Batko. We're going to break down each giving you key elements the Steelers must get right on both sides of the ball to turn around from their three-game losing streak, beat the Bengals, and at least clinch having to play the Houston Texans in the first round of the playoffs. All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers here. And as always, you can read our work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. And you can find this show and all of our content from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy. Subscribe to the channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of this show, as well as all the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this episode is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years, recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, we are one day out from the Steelers playing the Bengals in a rematch at Acrisure Stadium. The Bengals need this game to stay alive in the playoffs. But personally, Brian, I think the Steelers need this game to stay alive in the playoffs. Yes, they're already clinched. But if they lose this game, they will be on a 4-game losing streak and most likely playing the Ravens in Baltimore next week. That would be a tough task to get a turnaround against them. Whereas if you win this game, you at least guarantee yourself playing the Texans, who have been reeling and are easily the lesser of the 4 division winners that are set out to be right now. Are you in the same boat as me, or do you feel like this is a must-win game for the Steelers, or is this more of just if they can figure some things out, that'd be nice, and they could still steal one in Baltimore next week?
I don't think it's a must-win because you're in the playoffs either way, and strange things can happen when you get in the dance, and strange things can happen in Steelers-Ravens if that's what it ends up being. But I really dismiss the notion that this isn't a high-stakes game because I'm with you, Chris. I'd feel a lot better about their chances beating this Texans team in Houston than I would this Ravens team in Baltimore. So I certainly wouldn't understand, resting starters, which some people suggested for whatever reason at the beginning of the week. And obviously Mike Tomlin's not going to do that. I could maybe see limiting snaps for some of your key guys, TJ Watt, Cam Heyward, try to beat the Bengals with a little less Cam, a little more, Keanu Benton, or a little less TJ, a little more Nick Herbig. Like that kind of stuff could make some sense. But no, I mean, by and large, you want to win this game for seeding. You also want to win this game for momentum and good vibes. Otherwise, riding a 4-game slide into the playoffs, I mean, we're all going to be sitting here talking about how, the Texans are battered and bruised. I mean, you're not going to really be any better shape than Houston at that point.
Exactly. So let's talk about this because the Steelers have been reeling on both sides of the ball, and it's been different things at different times. So let's each do this. We're each going to give one offensive and one defensive thing to focus on that you got to see corrected in this game. Brian, let's start with you on offense.
Okay, I mean, maybe it's an oversimplification, but I'm going to say Russell Wilson being the maestro. I mean, I'm writing about that for today. It might already be on the site by the time people watch or listen to this show. Arthur Smith talked about it at length on Wednesday. It would have been basically you've got to know how to walk that line of being aggressive, but also playing smart football, living to see another down, another day. And that should be Russ's biggest strength at the stage of his career. At 36, he's seen all there is to see. He's hoisted the Lombardi. He's got one of the best touchdown to interception ratios of any active passer or any quarterback in NFL history. So he knows how to play mistake-free football. But at this stage, and with a new cast of characters around him, going through the adversity that he's hit these last few weeks with the pick and the fumbles, those that were lost and even those that weren't, he's got to reel it back in and be the right guy at the right time for this team the way he was earlier in the season, because that's basically what separates teams once they get to the playoffs is the execution from the guys under center, the ones who are taking the right opportunities, hitting those shots when defense gives it to them, and not throwing games away the way we've seen a guy like Josh Allen in the past in the postseason unable to get over that hump. That's just kind of the magic of playing the quarterback position in the NFL, and why we so often group them into the guys who you can win Super Bowls with, and the guys who don't quite have it.
I think so too. If I was to pick one first, I would also go with Russell Wilson. That is the key. Limit your turnovers, make the big plays, be the smart quarterback that he has been. But here's another thing, Brian. I think he has it within himself to do all of that. We've seen him do it even before the Steelers. Like, that's who Russell Wilson's been. That's why they brought him to Pittsburgh. Granted, he still needs to do it, but I think he's one guy you can kind of trust to do that. I think a key in this game is the offensive line needs to get its stuff together, because there have been some really good games in this offensive line this season. There's been some bad games, and that game against the Chiefs was a bad one. Now, I will say, I went back and looked at it. I thought actually Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, the right side, and Mason McCormick, the right side kind of held it down. I think McCormick was maybe the lesser of the three there, but Dan Moore and Isaac Seumalo looked lost at times. I mean, Dan Moore was getting beaten a lot. Isaac Seumalo just didn't touch the guys on certain plays. This group has to coalesce, and they have to coalesce in being physical and being accountable for their spots in pass protection. And it's in both things. I watched that Bengals-Broncos game last week, and I just watched that Broncos offense just bowl down the Bengals a lot of times when they were running the ball. This needs to be one of those games where the Steelers running backs, they hurt the Bengals last time by catching the ball out the backfield. Look for the Bengals to try to take that away in this game. So how do you do that? You counter it with good rush play, but you also counter it with the running game actually hurting them and pushing them back. And that starts with the offensive line giving Russ time to make those throws deeper downfield, not having to move his launch point all the time, and also getting the run game going. So give me the offensive line on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, Brian, what is your key for this that this team has to figure out this week?
I think it's going to be collapsing the pocket on Joe Burrow. I mean, the way he's playing right now, he's just lights out. I think it's an insane streak that he's on of games with at least 3 touchdown passes. I mean, he's just going bonkers at the moment, and you can't cover forever back there. Even if the secondary cleans things up, even if the communication's coming cleaner from Patrick Queen, or if they're finding different means to communicate, or they're facing some confrontations within that unit this week and, figured out what ails them, you still can't cover Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, even Andre Yoshibonk and Mike Gesicki for too long over the course of a snap. And Joe Burrow, he's going to be able to keep his eyes up in the pocket. He's eventually going to find someone who's going to fit a ball into a tight window if he has to. So like we've seen the script for the Steelers in previous games against the Bengals, when they have done a good job against their offense, get to Joe Burrow, whether it's with Cam Heyward in that interior quick pressure so he can't step up, or if it's TJ Watt off the edge. That's such a good, underrated individual rivalry in the AFC North is TJ versus Joe B. So this would be a great time for the takeaways to come back, and you probably don't get those takeaways unless you do get that pressure on Burrow.
I agree. That's a key in this game. Get pressure on him, collapse the pocket, and don't give him those escape lanes. They've given a few to Reese in recent weeks, and it's hurt them. I'm a compound upon that, because as people often say, pressure creates interceptions, coverage creates sacks, and this is a week where the coverage has to be better. I'm not saying shut down Jamar Chase. It'd be great if they did. I'm not saying don't let Joe Burrow get 300 yards. Probably will. I'm saying make it so that Joe Burrow does not have 2-second ball out of his hand type of reads all game long. Make it very rare that he gets the open man out of alignment, that you're out of position, that if he's throwing all game on you, he has to be pinpoint accurate into tight windows time and time and time again. And he also has to wait for those windows to open up. If you do that in this game, you give TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Heyward, Nick Herbig, whoever else is bringing the heat, you give them more chances to get home. So it has to be hand in hand in this game. I agree. Pass rush is a big part of this. They need to control the line of scrimmage. The Bengals might be missing some offensive linemen in this game. Doesn't matter who lines up against you. Get after them. This has to be there, but also behind them, help them out by not giving up the easy coverages, not blowing the coverage assignments. They do those 4 things, 2 things on offense, 2 things on defense. The Steelers could use this as their get-right game and set themselves up for the playoffs. We'll get back to this game in a moment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. We got to get to our pick six and pick through some games that are relevant to the playoffs this weekend, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's get to our pick six for the weekend. So as always, we pick 6 games that don't involve the Steelers, but maybe involve the Steelers in outside factors. We'll pick through them, and we'll pick through the one that I think Steelers fans are going to be looking at just before the Steelers game, and that's Browns at Ravens. The Browns are 19.5-point underdogs to the Ravens. Someone pointed out that is worse odds against the Browns than they ever got in their 0-17 season. Or 0-16 season. That's pretty bad. They're playing Bailey Zappi at quarterback. I think you and I talked about this before we started filming. Just hand the division to the Ravens now.
I'm picking the Browns. No, I mean, I do kind of wonder, like, are the Steelers players going to be keeping an eye on this one a little bit as they're heading to the stadium, even during warm-ups, trying to get the score updates. But I'm guessing they won't need too many updates after the first or second quarter, because it is, though, an example of how the schedule really broke nicely for the Ravens, that they get to finish against the Browns in this state. Steelers faced them the first time around when they had a little bit of a juice about them with Jameis coming in there at quarterback, and they won that snow game up in Cleveland, and obviously they beat the Ravens earlier this season too, but they're just a far less frisky team at this stage of things.
Agreed. The Ravens.
I think the Ravens might even cover this one.
They might not just cover. They might cover and then bench their starters in the second half and still win by above the 19.5-point spread. So that's a lot right there. But let's get to other games that are kind of relevant this weekend. We go to Sunday
against the Giants when they were huge favorites.
Yeah, that was nuts. That was pretty bad. Panthers at Falcons. Falcons are 7.5-point favorites in this one. The Falcons with Michael Penix are kind of interesting right now, Brian. They need some help. They're still alive for the playoffs. They're 8-8. They would need to win and then hope that the Buccaneers lose, and then they would then be in with the tiebreaker because of that. Give me the Falcons in this one. I think that they beat the Panthers.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, the Panthers are going to want to try to finish the season on a high note with Bryce Young and Mr. Positive first-year coach Dave Canales. But yeah, I think Penix will do well here in this home start, and they'll probably end up finishing on a high note as well out of the playoffs. But I know Dawson Batko, my son, is hoping the Falcons make the playoffs. For some reason, he's been a Dirty Birds fan ever since I brought home the flag from the Week 1 game against the Steelers. They've become one of his many teams.
One of his many. All right, wait. How many teams is Dawson a fan of?
I mean, the Steelers are still his favorite.
Okay.
Naturally, but he said, he just told me today, if the Falcons play the Lions, it's going to be a really tough choice for him.
He's also a Lions fan.
He also likes the Lions, kind of likes the Packers.
We need to hook him up with Snoop Dogg. He can teach him how to be fans of everybody in the NFL.
Yeah, or Drake.
That's very true. All right, let's move along here. Another NFC South showdown. The other NFC South showdown. The Buccaneers are 13.5-point favorites over the Saints. The Saints have been reeling for some time. The Buccaneers, they're a dangerous team in the playoffs. Like, I would not want to have to play the Buccaneers, which is why the game of the week that we'll talk about later, I think is very relevant to see who wins that game. But give me the Buccaneers win this one. I think they even cover the spread, and they'll bounce the Falcons from the playoffs.
I think the Rams could be dangerous as well, though, and they're going to be the two teams kind of vacillating between the 3rd and 4th seed in the NFC South. Yeah, I don't think the Bucs are going to blow their postseason chances against a Saints team that's just not very good, doesn't have a quarterback. I think Baker, Mike Evans, they'll ball out, get his 1,000 yards, and they can coast into the playoffs.
This game relevant for the Bengals more so than the Steelers. The Broncos are 10.5-point favorites over the Chiefs because the Chiefs are resting their backups. That's well known. They have nothing to play for in this game. The Broncos are playing for their playoff lives. If they win, no matter what happens with the Bengals in the Steelers game, the Bengals would be out. It also doesn't impact the Steelers because the Steelers will have the tiebreaker on them if the Broncos win and the Steelers lose. Give me the Broncos. I think they've actually played good football a lot of times this year. They've had some bad mistakes, but that's a team to me that impressed me this season. I really liked what I saw, what I've seen out of Bo Nix. I think Quinn Miners is a heck of a guard that's led that offensive line, and I think this defense can make some noise. Give me them winning this game.
They've impressed, but if you're the Chiefs or anybody else in the AFC, who would you rather see sneak? Who would you rather see sneaking into the playoffs?
Yeah.
Bo Nix, Sean Payton, and the Broncos, or Joe Burrow and the Red Hot Bengals? I'd be like, here, if I were Andy Reid and the Chiefs this week playing the Broncos in Denver, I'd be like, here, let me dust off this field for you right here, Mr. Nix. We're just going to go ahead and veer toward the sidelines. You just hit Courtland Sutton straight down the middle for another touchdown. That'd be just fine. Thank you. Yes, the Chiefs, they had no motivation to win this game anyway, but then even the hidden motivation of keeping the Bengals at home is doubly, advantageous. So, yeah, Broncos for sure.
Chargers at Raiders. Chargers 4.5-point favorites in this game. Chargers have clinched the playoffs, unlike the Broncos, because they're 10-6 here. But if the Steelers lose and the Chargers win, the Chargers could end up being the 5 seed and get to play the Texans in Houston. I think that's something to play for. Granted, the Chargers are only 4.5-point favorites, but give me Los Angeles. I do think they find a way to win this game.
Yeah, same. But I thought it was an interesting answer from Jim Harbaugh this week when he was asked about similar possibility of resting guys. And he's like, no, we got to try to win this game, because if we get the 5 seed, that means we could get a home playoff game against the 7 seed. And then if we advance, we could get a home playoff game against the 6 seed. So like, he's really Harbaugh braining the whole thing there. But I mean, it does make sense when you think about it. Crazy things can happen. So yes, all that being said, they're going to go hard to win this game in Vegas. They're more talented. I don't think the Raiders have the upset in them this week.
I don't think so either. Let's go to the game of the week that everyone's going to be watching. Sunday Night Football. Vikings at Lions. First place in the NFC North on the line. Winner gets the 1 seed in the NFC. Loser gets the 5 seed, which means they would probably play the Buccaneers, who, by the way, beat the Lions earlier this year. The Lions are 2.5-point favorites in this game, Brian. But and listen, the Lions were my Super Bowl favorite. I picked them to win. They've been my team of destiny for most of this season. But give me the Vikings this week. I like what I'm seeing them, how I'm seeing them play. Their defense is getting after it. They get after the quarterback. This is going to be a physical game on both sides of the line of scrimmage for both teams. They both have good fronts. And I like what the Vikings are cooking with on defense and on offense. I think that this is a close one, but the Vikings find a way to edge out the Lions in the end here.
I was probably going to take the Vikings, but it's kind of a coin flip to me. And we've agreed on every game from this pretty week 18 slate. So whatever, I'll take the Lions at home. I'll bank on Dan Campbell getting the boys up and ready in the Motor City. And I'll roll with my son's preferred team there to get the NFC's number 1 seed. But yeah, those first 5 games we picked were filler. And this is truly the game of the week. And it should be a lot of fun to watch Sunday night. I wish it were Saturday night instead of the Steelers, but nobody wants to hear us complain.
No, nobody likes to hear us complain in all our duties. But we got to get to Steelers-Bengals and our keys for that game. We'll get to all that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you the show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda. You can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, or at moonhonda.com, their website. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun to drive HRV, and versatile CRV. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, it's time to pick Steelers-Bengals and go over our keys for this game. The Steelers are 1.5-point underdogs to the Bengals. The money lines are at -130, Bengals plus 110 Steelers. The over-under set at 48.5 points. I'm looking at this game, Brian, and we talked about all the things the Steelers need to do on both sides of the ball. This is a get-right game, and this is a tough game. And like you said, Chiefs, Bills, all those top teams, they would prefer I think even the Ravens, they don't want to see the Bengals in the playoffs right now because that passing attack can just light things up and make things crazy for anyone. And I think it would take a team with a certain skill set to be able to beat the Bengals and control the game at their pace. And if the Steelers play at that skill set that the kind of team that they built, I think they have the recipe to beat this team. Heck, they beat them before this season. The question will be, can they get back to that recipe? There's been lots of talk from guys like Cam Heyward, Deshaun Elliott, Mika Fitzpatrick, a whole team talking about what they got to do right and how it's within their control. Brian, give us like sort of your breakdown as far as how the Steelers do kind of assert control back and make them be the team that dictates the pace of this game rather than the Bengals being that team.
Well, I do think getting the ball to their playmakers is going to be key. I mean, you brought up a good point in the first segment about this offensive line has been kind of hit or miss. And, the Bengals pass rush, even without Sam Hubbard, who's probably out for the year, Joseph Osai opposite Trey Hendrickson's actually had a little bit of he's got some momentum lately. He's getting after quarterbacks and making some plays, stepping up. He was a first or second round. I think he was a second rounder 2 years ago. So talented guy coming out of Texas when he did. So they do have the ability to make life tough on the Steelers tackles. And Dan Moore is in a bit of a slump for sure. So they've got to protect Russ because I think, one thing about Russ is as much as I think the above the net game is still, the equalizer for him potentially down the stretch here. He doesn't have the escapability that he once did. I mean, he doesn't have the escapability that Justin Fields presented early in the season. So you do need to be a little cleaner in terms of the pocket that you give him. He got a little bit nifty on some keepers in that Chiefs game, but I think a lot of those were, at that point, Kansas City was willing to live with Russ taking off a little bit with his legs. So, I think if you get the ball to George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, pretty much know what they're going to do. They're going to make plays as long as Freiermuth doesn't fumble again. I'm sure he wants that one back. But on the other side of the ball, Joey Porter Jr., if he follows T. Higgins again, which just knowing Mike Tomlin, I think he's going to do that. I mean, he's somebody who really believes in those philosophies and tends to not get too cute, especially in these rivalry games where he kind of just feels like, what we're going to do. We know what you're going to do. Let's just go try to do it better. I don't think you're going to see any major changes from the secondary. I still think you're going to see Cam Sutton out there. Dante Jackson, I don't know if he's going to go. It might be a Corey Trice game again. And, maybe they'll roll with the same plan of Porter one-on-one with Higgins as much as possible and bracket, try to take away Jamar Chase. But, that's a lot easier said than done. So the other X factor, I think, in this one, Chris, is other than Dante Jackson, whom I just mentioned, the Bengals have a lot more injuries that they're dealing with right now than the Steelers. Yeah. Higgins is questionable. I feel like he's been questionable basically every week, and then he guts it out, puts up a huge game, and makes himself a lot of money in the free agency market. But right tackle Amarius Mims is questionable with an ankle/hand. That's not a combination you see very often. Chase Brown, their number one running back, questionable with an ankle injury that looked pretty bad last week. And one who popped up on the injury report Thursday, their number one corner, Cam Taylor-Britt, who I think they would want to see a lot of George Pickens in their defensive plan from coordinator Lou Anarumo. He is questionable with an ankle injury. On top of all that, left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. told reporters last week he's playing on a fractured fibula. So basically a broken leg, Greg Jennings style, and yet he's still trying to keep himself upright. So that they are a team that they're making a push here, and I give them credit because I thought their season was essentially over when we were down there in Cincinnati and the Steelers won that game on the banks of the Ohio River. But I still just don't think they're still leaking oil a little bit to me.
I think so too. I think that I've said all season long, look, this team's talented, but I don't think this team's good enough to be a playoff team this year with their defense, with their O-line, and now that O-line's hurt up. I think that, like I said, the Steelers, they have the recipe to stop these guys. This is within their grasp, within their talents. I don't think this would be the Steelers playing outside of themselves. If they beat the Bengals this week, it would be about them getting back to who they are. The question is, can they get back to who they are? So with that being said, Brian, how do you see this game playing out? What's your turning point in the game, and what's your final score prediction?
I really could see it going either way, but all the injuries that I just outlined for the Bengals, the Steelers being at home and dealing with this slump, having the extra rest too, which they're usually good with, that's going to be enough to push me over the top for them. I could see it going the Bengals' way. I could see this being high scoring. I could see it being low scoring on what's supposed to be a really frigid day Saturday night. Well, I should say a frigid night Saturday on the North Shore, but I think I lean more toward it being a lot of points on the board with the way these two defenses are playing, more so with the way the Bengals offense is playing. Maybe it's going to come down to who has the ball last. Maybe it's going to come down to Chris Boswell making a kick that Cade York does not. He doinked that one for the Bengals on Saturday night that could have made that game a lot more easy on them. So I'm going to go Steelers 33, Bengals 30.
Okay, close one there, high scoring. I have a similar. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a one-score game. I look at these two teams and I think that the Bengals can get things right, but I think the Steelers, they don't have to be perfect on defense. They just have to be opportunistic. They have had some bad bounces on their fumbles. They forced, I think, 4 straight fumbles without recovering one. And I think that this defense is primed to get pressure on Joe Burrow, move him off his lunch spot, actually bring him down, do well in that spot there. I think this offense has the means to score on this Bengals defense. The Bengals defense has also been opportunistic in the last 3 weeks. They have the most turnovers in the NFL with 10. But I also think that that's where Russell Wilson can. I think he is a key, like you said. He's a key. If he flips his game around, if he gets back to playing the way Russell Wilson has for most of the season for the Steelers and for most of his career, I think that makes it harder for the Bengals to take the ball away, which is what they've thrived off. And if that doesn't happen, I think the Steelers' run game gets going and they start to control this pace. I say the Steelers win 30-24. With basically some turnovers in the fourth quarter, kind of sealing the Bengals' fate there, and the Steelers clinching at least the 5 seed. We're both predicting it will be the 5 seed because there's no way we see Bailey Zappi and the Browns beating Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in that game.
Selfishly, I hope that's the case because while I like Baltimore, we were just there. It's going to be cold. It always seems to rain when we're there at this point in the season.
Us.
And I wouldn't mind a nice indoor football game at NRG Stadium back in Houston.
It certainly would be cozy there. I've been there once on Christmas Day all along back in 2017. But certainly would be interesting, and I think it would be best for the Steelers to get there. Will they get there? Well,
we'll have the Deontay Johnson narrative would be there too. He's supposed to play this week, so we'll see if he gets to run around, make some plays for the Texans in a basically meaningless game in Tennessee.
Yeah, well, I guess this will be the second time for us to try to get that narrative going this year, as he was supposed to do with the Ravens. That didn't work out. But we'll have our full team at Acrisure Stadium this weekend. Chris Carter with Brian Batko. We'll also look out for Rafa Apollo, Jerry Dulac. I assume Jason Mackey will also be there. You can also keep it here with the post-game show. Paul Zeiss and Adam Bittner will have their thoughts after the game. We'll also have our guys at the stadium giving you thoughts, and I'll also be giving my thoughts as they get ready to play. We'll kind of have a good sense of who they'll play in the playoffs. All here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Read our work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find us here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and daily with all of our different content from all of our sports writers here at the Post-Gazette. We'll see you here Saturday night at Acrisure Stadium right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.